Have you ever watched someone who mocked your pain suddenly face their own downfall? They laughed at your scars, thinking you wouldn't survive their betrayal. But now, their lives are crumbling while you remain standing in strength. By the end, you'll see why walking away wasn't defeat, but the key moment that triggered their reckoning. If this resonates, keep listening. This isn't about revenge, it's divine justice in motion. Scripture reminds us that whatever a person sows, they will also reap. God's justice finds ways to rebalance what was stolen. We'll look at how their collapse unfolds, why your leaving mattered, and how you can stay rooted in peace. And it all begins with what happens when the harm they sent out refuses to stay hidden and starts circling back to them. This brings us to what I call the Boomerang Principle. It's the spiritual reality that what a person sends out eventually returns to them. When someone sows deception, mockery, or betrayal, they may believe it vanishes. But from a spiritual perspective, actions carry weight. They cannot dissolve into nothing. The energy in those actions circles back, carrying the same sting that was once aimed at you. Think of it like this. A narcissist fires off words meant to cripple your peace or pierce your identity. For a moment, you may feel the wound, but you are not left unprotected. God grants you a kind of shield, allowing you to endure while those attacks lose force. And then comes the return flight. The harm they chose to launch does not disappear. It comes home to the very heart that released it. This is not about mystical guesswork. It is about the consistent way the spiritual world is ordered. Every cruel laugh, every betrayal, every manipulation adds up. Like numbers tallied in an account, the weight of those actions must eventually be paid. And when the reckoning comes, it often looks like financial strain, fractured relationships, or restless nights. Their trouble is not random bad fortune, it's the direct response of what they chose to plant. Consider a neutral example. In the background material, there's a workplace story where someone mocked a colleague's anxiety attacks. Later, they themselves began dealing with the same kind of panic. It wasn't punishment by human hands. It was the natural return of the energy they had put into the world. Patterns like this reveal the steady rhythm of God's justice. What is sown eventually comes back to meet the sower. Now, timing matters. The fall usually comes not in the heat of battle, but when they feel most secure. When they sit back and think, I got away with it, that is the very stage where the mask begins to crack. What was hidden becomes exposed. What seemed solid slips through their hands. And what was mocked now becomes their own reality. Here's the deeper truth. You don't have to chase justice. Your peace speaks for itself. Your healing is the testimony. When you stand steady, their collapse is no longer avoidable. The mirror they wanted to shatter reflects clearly in, they must face it. The boomerang returns. Their arrows find them. And what happens next reveals why your role in their story was never secondary at all. 2. The unskippable final boss. In every story they tell themselves, they are the hero at the center. They believe you were just an obstacle on their climb for more power, more admiration. But here's the reality: they misunderstood the script. You were not written into their life as a side character. You were the divine checkpoint they could not avoid. Your presence was the test they couldn't pass. That's why I call you the unskippable final boss. Pause in every game. The story halts until the final challenge is faced. You can't bargain with it, distract it, or charm your way out. You must confront it. And in their life, That's who you were, the one encounter they could not bypass. Think about someone in your life who refused to be corrected. This is that pattern in spiritual terms. The narcissist did everything to resist: manipulation to shrink you, cruelty to derail you, control to keep you beneath them. But instead of humility, they chose denial. Your presence required honesty. They wanted the crown without the refining fire. They wanted rewards without the truth that exposes motives. But in God's design, there is no skipping the refining. While you stood beside them, your light covered much of their shadow. Your steadiness softened the edges of their emptiness. You became a filter, dimming the glare of the consequences they should have faced. They borrowed your strength, even your grace, to delay the confrontation with themselves. But the moment you walked away, the protection lifted. Their shadow became impossible to ignore. Without your prayers, without your counsel, without your endurance, they were left alone with what they had spent years trying to escape. Many confuse leaving with defeat, but your departure wasn't abandonment. It was activation. That exit was the moment their real curriculum began. Now they are seated in a classroom they never wanted, facing an exam written by their own choices. Every lie, every betrayal, every act of pride is on that paper. And this time, no one else can supply the answers. This is why their world shakes after you exit. They are not fighting you anymore. They are fighting themselves with no buffer, no shield, no light to borrow. Their illusion of control snaps, and the mask slips. This confrontation cannot be skipped, delayed, or replaced. It is the boss battle of their own making, and it will not resolve until the truth is faced. And here is where we see something deeper: why this final battle always feels heavier, why the collapse they experience outweighs the harm they unleashed. 3. Mathematical justice system. In spiritual terms, what comes back to them is never equal to what they gave. Consequences compound. This is what I call the mathematical justice system. It doesn't settle accounts in simple exchanges. It multiplies them over time until the full weight is felt. Like compound interest, small cruelties grow until the debt crushes the debtor. They may have stolen your peace in moments, but what returns is unrest that multiplies in their own home. What felt like a joke when they drained your strength becomes the very weakness that collapses their foundation. The harvest never returns equal to the seed. It comes back multiplied. Think about it as a hidden account. Each betrayal, each manipulation, each mocking word, it all gets tallied. Time doesn't erase it. Time increases it. And when the moment comes due, it feels heavier than what was originally taken because the interest has been gathering silently in the background. Here's where endurance meets mathematics. Your quiet faith, your refusal to retaliate, your steady resilience became the principle in that account. Every tear, every sleepless night, every time you stayed upright. When collapse seemed easier, all of that added weight to the ledger. The very strength you thought went unnoticed became the measure God used for their return. You didn't need to chase revenge. Your steadfastness became the accounting. Picture the thief who forces open a door, expecting to run off free. Yet once inside, the door locks tight, alarms sound, and the walls close in. They are trapped by what they set in motion. That's the nature of spiritual debt. It is always paid, not by hand chasing them down, but by systems already in place. So while they plotted, the mathematics continued. While they mocked, the balance accrued. And when you walked away, The books closed. The sum came due without appeal. Their downfall is the final sum of what they stole from your spirit. And now, without your endurance to buffer them, without your light to steady them, something far more personal begins to unfold, the unraveling that comes the moment your presence no longer holds their world together. 4. The cord-cutting catalyst. This is where the cord-cutting catalyst comes into play. A chosen one's presence often functions like a lifeline, holding together what someone else refuses to strengthen within themselves. A spiritual cord forms when your light connects to someone living in emptiness. That cord becomes their hidden supply, much like an umbilical cord feeding a false self with nourishment that was never truly theirs. The moment you set boundaries, that cord severs, and when it is cut, the flow ends. What the world reads as distance is, in truth, a shift in spiritual authority. They can no longer draw from your strength, your patience, or your prayers. Setting that boundary wasn't cold. It was spiritual surgery necessary, and healing. Take away the hidden support, and the whole structure collapses. What they paraded as stability was always reinforced by your endurance. What they called favor was layered with the covering of your prayers. With the cord cut, the scaffolding is gone, and their house of cards begins to fold under its own weight. This loss shows up in real and practical ways. Doors that once swung open with ease slam shut. Opportunities seem to evaporate. Where there was once flow, frustration now multiplies. What changed was not luck, but the expiration of borrowed favor. That spiritual economy corrected itself, and they are left to walk on the currency of their own character, which cannot hold them. Remember, this isn't punishment. It's the unavoidable outcome of living on borrowed light. Just as a plant cannot grow long under artificial bulbs, they cannot flourish on energy that never belonged to them. When you walk away, they encounter the truth of their own poverty. While they may call it misfortune, it is the rebalancing of what should always have been, truth revealed and dependence broken. Your departure did not just close a chapter. It rewrote the foundation beneath them. Lies lose their grip. Masks fall apart. Manipulations lose their power, all because the sustaining cord is gone. What seemed like a simple goodbye was actually a turning point in the spirit. You remove the supply, and the image they worked so hard to project could no longer stand. Type hands off in the comments if you've cut a cord and felt the shift. And now, as that sustaining thread is removed, another reality takes shape. When the light they siphoned is no longer present, what has been concealed begins to stand in plain view. 5. The mirror of exposure. The moment you walked away, something else stepped in. The mirror of exposure. This is the stage where their projection no longer holds and their mask cannot stay in place. They once seemed convincing as they pointed fingers and twisted stories, but without you to carry the weight, the illusion fractures quickly. The mask slips. People see the truth. Projection is their favorite weapon. They attach their own darkness to someone else, making you the canvas for every denied flaw. They accused you of what they secretly carried, all to keep themselves looking spotless. But your role as the chosen one made that harder. Your light exposed reflection. Like a prophet exposing a false priesthood, your very presence unsettled their disguise. That mirror terrified them because it revealed a reality they fought to deny. When you step away, the projector stops. The screen comes down. Pause, with no one left to absorb the shadow, Their true nature bleeds into plain sight. The manipulation, the arrogance, the deceit, it all starts spilling out unfiltered. Without you to deflect the darkness, their traits stand uncovered for others to witness. Think about it like a play. For years, they held a mask on stage while you stood quietly behind the curtain holding the frame. The moment you left, the mask slipped because no one was holding it steady anymore. The audience, the very people they once deceived, began to notice the act was staged. Their whisper campaigns, once sharp, began to sound hollow in contrast to the actual evidence of their life. Smear campaigns start loud. Truth finishes louder. Lies may run for a season, but they collapse under their own contradictions. Over time, the story they created about you unravels while the reality of their character rises to the surface. People stop repeating their words and start observing their actions. And what they claimed about you no longer sticks. Here's the weight of this exposure. Your absence created a vacuum they could not fill, and the mask that once fooled others is gone. What's left is a reflection they can no longer escape. They are seen as they are unmasked, standing in the center of their undoing. Your absence revealed what their lies couldn't hide. And that same dynamic shapes what happens to the very words they once spoke over you, words that never landed where they wanted but had to return somewhere. 6. The return to sender mechanism. Purity is its own shield. That is why when venomous words or dark intentions are sent your way, they cannot settle on you. From a spiritual perspective, evil often returns to its origin when it can't land on the protected. Your alignment with God's covering makes you untouchable to what was shaped for your harm. This is the return to sender mechanism. It is not superstition, but a reality of how the spiritual order responds to intent. Just as gravity pulls a tossed stone back to earth, the weight of malicious energy finds its rightful home. When it cannot penetrate your armor of integrity, it simply travels back to the life that launched it. Picture envy as a boomerang thrown with confidence, aimed to wound. But its arc cannot rest on you. It curves back, striking the hand that sent it. That is why the same traps they set for you begin to close around their own feet. They may have declared that your finances would run dry, yet suddenly their own accounts strain under the weight of loss. They may have whispered against your relationships, expecting division to surface, but then their own connections begin to unravel. Sometimes this return lands right at the moment they finally feel secure. That timing sharpens the lesson. It makes the consequence undeniable. Here's the good news. You don't have to fight for this outcome. You don't need to retaliate or scheme. You don't have to mirror back their malice. You don't have to lift a hand. You don't have to prove anything at all. You don't have to retaliate. Keep praying and keep walking in integrity. Your peace becomes the shield that answers every curse. And your stillness is what sends those words back where they began. The strength of this mechanism rests not in noise, but in purity. Your restraint is more powerful than their aggression. Your calm spirit becomes a barrier, and your alignment with truth is what makes their intentions powerless. What they launched with venom cannot survive inside your atmosphere. Some name it justice. Some call it spiritual law. The language is less important than the pattern. What leaves their lips cannot vanish into air. It returns. Always. You remain standing because the covering of God does not fail. They stumble because what was meant for you could not live with you. It had to go back home. Next, We'll see what happens to the foundation they built while they were mocking your process. 7. The foundation cracking. Have you ever noticed how the ones who laughed at your lowest point now can't seem to hold their own lives steady? They thought your struggles proved you were weak, but in truth, they were leaning on a foundation built on image and comparison. When you stepped out of the picture, that fragile base began to show its cracks. Their laughter wasn't harmless. It revealed just how shallow their identity really was. They appeared stable, but only because they stood next to you while you carried storms they never had to face. Your storm refined you. Their comfort hollowed them out. Your trial was the cement that built your foundation. Lean into that refinement. It proved your footing. Picture two builders. One digs deep, setting stone under the soil. The other rushes, stacking walls directly on sand. At first, the second house looks quicker, even more polished. But when storms come, only the house with rock beneath it can stand. That's the difference between you and them. They mistook your tears for weakness, forgetting that in God's design, even tears become building blocks. Every lonely prayer, every hidden night of struggle was pressing you deeper into a foundation no storm could move. Meanwhile, their smirks came from the illusion of stability, a stability that only lasted as long as they could compare themselves against you. When you walked away, the mirror broke. Without a measuring stick, their cracks were unavoidable. The relationships they paraded, the finances they flaunted, the image they depended on all started collapsing under their own weight. Their ground was never rock, it was sand, and sand cannot support the pressure of reality. Here's the irony. What they mocked in you became the lesson they couldn't outrun. They judged your trial, yet now they live in their own unraveling. The stability they pretended to hold is the very thing vanishing under their feet. Their collapse does not come from your hands. It is the harvest of what they built without substance. God uses your refining fire. The pressure that felt unbearable became your strength. The testimony that proves your foundation is real. Their lack of testing left them fragile. So when truth demanded weight, cracks appeared everywhere. And it's in that very weakness, when the clamor of their performance fades, that another truth rises. It's not just collapse that reveals them. It's what your steady quiet has been speaking all along. 8. The silent reckoning. The reckoning that cuts deepest often comes without a sound. This is what I call the silent reckoning. They live on noise. You live on peace. When you stop feeding them, they face themselves. Your endurance in quiet wasn't weakness. It was a strategy. Pause for 2 seconds. They expected you to snap, to argue, to collapse under pressure. But you didn't give them what they wanted. Every insult they threw out collapsed into emptiness because you chose not to respond. Your silence protects your position and exposes their need. Think about it. Conflict is their oxygen. They thrive on your reactions, your defenses, your explanations. The moment those stop, their entire system begins to choke. Silence to them is not absence, it is confrontation. They can't manipulate air. They can't control what won't engage. Picture a performer who steps out ready for applause, but the chairs are empty. No claps, no shouts, no eyes watching. That vacuum becomes unbearable. The narcissist finds themselves in that same space. Without your energy, their stage is silent. Without your reactions, there's only the sound of their own choices echoing back at them. The irony is sharp. The silence they mocked as weakness becomes the arena where their torment grows. Without your voice to counter theirs, all that remains is their own unrehearsed truth. With no scapegoat left, what they bury resurfaces. The lies press louder in their conscience because you are no longer carrying them. And here's the shift. Your peace does more than protect you. It shines like a mirror against their unrest. As your life moves forward, quiet progress, joy without announcement, growth without noise, their unrest grows louder. The more your presence radiates peace, the more their unrest and chaos have nowhere to hide. This reckoning doesn't come with thunder. It doesn't happen in public shouting matches or dramatic scenes. It arrives quietly in the late hours when no audience is left and the mask sits on the floor. That's when they must face what they've become. The most shattering truth is not what you said, it's what your silence left them to confront. So while you ascend in quiet strength, their spiral amplifies. While you lean into peace, they wrestle with emptiness. This is why silence stands as one of the strongest weapons you've ever carried. May God give you peace. And as you continue to hold your ground in quiet strength, another force begins its work, an invisible alignment shift that changes everything around them. 9. The divine alignment shift. This moment is where something larger takes place, the divine alignment shift. What happens after your departure is not random collapse, but spiritual recalibration. Favor returns to where it belongs. From the outside, it may look like jobs drying up, doors closing, or alliances shaking apart. But beneath the surface, the order of things is being reset so that each life operates in its rightful orbit. Your presence carried more than companionship. It carried authority. A chosen one walks with a measure of grace that moves beyond personal benefit. That grace spills over to those connected, creating opportunities they could not produce on their own. While you stood beside them, they enjoyed access to blessings they never cultivated, doors opening, breaks appearing, favor resting on them. But the source was never their strength. It was your assignment, releasing overflow into their space. Once the cord is cut, the small boat faces the waves on its own. That's what happens when your energy is removed. What had felt steady now shakes. Doors that opened for them close because they built on borrowed favor. Opportunities begin to demand character they never developed, and without your presence, they cannot sustain the rhythm. Now, the balance is restored. What they borrowed must return to its rightful steward. They can no longer ride your prayers into open gates or use your endurance as a shield against consequence. Spiritual alignment demands correction, and the correction separates truth from illusion. For one, the path rises. For the other, the mask drops. When you step away, trust that God is recalibrating both of you. For you, it means an upward shift into clarity, peace, and assignment. For them, it means returning to the level of their own decisions. What looks like a fall is, in truth, exposure. Without your covering, they face the raw return of their choices. If this resonates, keep listening. Understand this. The shift was never about punishment. It was about alignment. Grace that once covered evaporates when it was never theirs to hold, and truth takes its place. Roads that once seemed effortless now demand integrity. Partnerships once strong reveal fractures. And where favor once flowed, reality shows through. Your removal was not loss, it was calibration. The scales of spiritual order balanced, and both lives found their rightful place. For you, it was movement toward destiny. For them, a revelation that borrowed light was never theirs to keep. And from that revelation comes another unraveling, one that shows up in the very web they once thought they could hold together. 10. The unraveling web. The unraveling begins with the unraveling web. Manipulators often believe they can keep every string pulled tight, weaving lies like a spider spinning threads. From a distance, it looks ordered, even impressive. But the truth is this: your presence held the tension that made their lies appear coherent. Remove the tension and the web sags, then tears. Your light was the hidden structure inside their scheme. While they spun stories and maneuvered people, your steadiness kept their contradictions out of sight. As long as you carried the weight, their narrative held together. Once you stepped away, the force holding it taut disappeared, and the threads began to drop. That's when the fabric collapses. Promises contradict, timelines overlap, details crumble. What once sounded polished now falls apart. The very words they used to trap others start to betray them. As the provided material put it, the lies they spun became the ropes tightening around their own neck. What was built to ensnare others now coils around them first. Allies who once cheered them on start taking cautious steps back. Quiet conversations begin. People compare notes, and the inconsistencies grow too glaring to ignore. Without you absorbing the confusion, the cracks cannot be hidden. Their web folds inward, truth seeping through every strand. Here's the breaking point. The one who thought they held every string becomes entangled in them. Fear drives them. Paranoia clouds their judgment. They scramble to cover holes with new lies, but those collapse faster than they can spin them. As the research put it, the puppet master has become the puppet, jerking on the strings of fear, paranoia, and self-destruction. Don't go back to retie their strings. Let truth run its course. Pause briefly here, and remember your departure did not create the collapse. It revealed what was already unstable. Their structure was weak from the start, propped up by what you carried. Without the covering of your light, the illusion falls on its own weight. Their web was always fragile. Your leaving just revealed it. Now the question becomes, if their sabotage and deception cannot truly hold you, what does that say about your purpose? 11. The protected purpose. This is where we see what I call the protected purpose. Those who tried to sabotage you operated from a narrow view, thinking their schemes could dictate your future. But their actions did not erase your assignment. They only pressed you through refining fire. Divine protection preserves your purpose. Opposition may refine it, but cannot finalize it. What they tried to bury, God turned into seed. And out of that pressure came resurrection. Every betrayal planted something. Every time they pushed you down, it stirred the ground for your rise. Their sabotage was never the end of your story. It was a tool in your preparation. Like soil pressed over a seed, the covering looks like burial, but beneath it is growth, expansion, and roots anchoring deep. The very pressure they applied became the force that accelerated you forward. The crown they reached for was never theirs to hold. It was divinely appointed to you. Their grasping at it only revealed their misunderstanding. You were marked for purpose that human hands cannot rewrite. This pattern repeats in many testimonies and in the material we've been given. Those who swore they would bury you now can't even look you in the face. Every tool used against you became part of your training, strengthening the very qualities that now sustain you. They thought humiliation would cling to you forever. They thought by cutting off opportunities or mocking your silence, they had stolen your future. But time and testimony prove otherwise. What looked like limitation was only redirection. What they called an ending was actually your refining. Their attempts to shrink you became the very process that expanded your reach. Here's the instruction for you. Lean into the refining process. Pray, set boundaries, rest in the progress God is already making. Trust that your path is not fragile. Your peace, your endurance, your steps forward are proof enough that your purpose is still intact. And never forget this, their sabotage became the soil for your growth. That is why you are still standing. That is why your story continues with greater clarity than before. As you carry that truth, remember it was never defeat. What looked like their victory was the very setup for what comes next, the unmistakable evidence of higher justice. Walking away was never your defeat, it was your declaration of strength. What seemed like silence to them was actually the loudest proof that your story remains guided and protected. Divine alignment means your path stays intact regardless of the interference of others. Your peace is not passive. It is the evidence that you are covered, chosen, and steady. You didn't need to fight back, smear, or clap back. Your stillness was enough to show the difference. That's why you are still standing, and that alone unsettles them more than anything else could. If this helped you, please subscribe, and share with someone who needs it. Then type divine justice in the comments. May God give you peace as you walk forward. If this helped you, please subscribe, and share with someone who needs it. Drop a thanks in the comments, and we'll pray for your healing journey. May God give you peace. Thank you for watching.